This is a conversation between four people: Timaeus, Hermocrates, Socrates, and Critias. Timaeus.
I am very thankful, Socrates, that I have finally arrived at the end. I feel like a tired traveler who has finished a long journey and can now rest. I pray to the being who has always existed and who has now been revealed by me, that my words will last as long as they have been spoken truly and in a way that is pleasing to him. But if I have said anything wrong without meaning to, I pray that he will give me the right correction. The right correction for someone who makes a mistake is to be set right. Since I want to speak truthfully in the future about the birth of the gods, I ask him to give me knowledge. Knowledge is the best and most perfect medicine. Now that I have made my prayer, I pass the discussion to Critias, who will speak next as we agreed.
Timaeus, I accept the task. At the beginning you said you would speak about very great matters, and you asked the listeners to be patient with you. I ask for the same patience, or even more, for what I am about to say. I know that my request may seem a little strange or rude, but I must still ask it. Who would deny that you spoke well? No sensible person would say that. I will try to show that I need even more patience than you did, because my subject is more difficult. It is much easier to seem to speak well about the gods to people than to speak well about people to other people. When listeners know nothing about a subject, it helps the person who is speaking. And we all know that we know very little about the gods. Let me explain what I mean, if you will follow me, Timaeus. Everything that we say is only an imitation and a representation. Think about the pictures that painters make of divine and heavenly bodies. The people who look at these paintings feel different levels of pleasure when they see them. We are satisfied with a painter who can imitate the earth, its mountains, rivers, forests, and the universe, and the things that exist and move within it. Because we know nothing exact about such things, we do not examine the painting closely. We do not analyze it. It is enough that the painter gives a vague and shadow-like image of them. But when someone tries to paint a human body, we quickly notice any mistake. Because we know human bodies well, we judge very strictly if the painter does not show every detail correctly. The same thing happens in speech. When someone describes divine and heavenly things, we accept a description that is not very accurate. But when someone speaks about human and mortal things, we judge much more carefully. So if I cannot explain my meaning clearly while I speak, you must forgive me. It is very hard to make a good and accurate image of human things. This is what I want to tell you. At the same time, I ask you, Socrates, to give me not less patience, but more patience for what I am about to say. If my request is fair, I hope you will grant it.
Socrates. Of course, Critias, we will grant your request. We will also grant the same favor in advance to Hermocrates as well as to you and Timaeus. I am sure that when his turn comes soon, he will ask for the same thing, so that he may begin fresh and not need to repeat the same request. Let him understand that this patience is already given to him. Now, my friend Critias, I will tell you the judgment of the audience. They believe that the last speaker performed wonderfully, and that you will need a great deal of patience from them if you are to follow him. Hermocrates.
Socrates, the warning you gave to him also applies to me. But remember, Critias, that a weak heart has never won a victory. So go forward and face the argument bravely. First call on Apollo and the Muses. Then let us hear you praise the ancient citizens and show their virtues.
My friend, Hermocrates, you are speaking boldly because you will speak last and someone else will stand before you. Soon, you will understand how serious the situation is. Still, I accept your encouragement. But besides the gods and goddesses you mentioned, I will especially call on Mnemosyne. The most important part of my speech depends on her help. If I can remember and repeat enough of what the priest said and what Solon brought here, I believe I will satisfy this audience. Now I will stop making excuses and begin. First, I must say that 9,000 years had passed since the war that was said to have happened between those who lived outside the Pillars of Heracles and those who lived inside them. I will describe this war. On one side, the city of Athens was said to be the leader and to have fought in the war. On the other side were the kings of Atlantis. Atlantis, it was said, was an island larger than Libya and Asia. Later it sank into the sea because of earthquakes. After it sank, it left behind a great barrier of mud that made it impossible for ships to sail from here to the open ocean. As the story continues, I will describe the different nations of barbarians and families of Greeks who existed at that time, as they appear in the story. But first I must describe the Athenians of that time and the enemies who fought against them. I must also describe the power and government of the two sides. Let us begin with Athens. Long ago, the gods divided the whole earth among themselves. Each god received a share. There was no fighting among them. You should not think that the gods did not know what was proper for each of them. Nor should you think that, knowing this, they would try to take by conflict what rightly belonged to another. Each god received what he needed through a fair division. Then they filled their own regions with people. After that, they cared for us, their children and possessions, like shepherds care for their flocks. But they did not rule us with blows or force like shepherds. Instead, they guided us the way a pilot guides a ship from the stern. They guided our souls with persuasion, like a rudder. And so they directed all mortal creatures. Different gods received different places and arranged them. Hephaestus and Athene were brother and sister. They came from the same father and had the same nature. They both loved philosophy and art. They received this land together as their shared portion because the land was naturally suited for wisdom and virtue. There they created brave people from the soil and placed in their minds the order of government. Their names are still remembered, but their deeds have been lost. This happened because the people who received the stories were later destroyed, and much time passed. When some people survived, as I said before, they lived in the mountains. They did not know the art of writing. They only heard the names of the ancient rulers, and they knew very little about what those rulers had done. They gladly gave these ancient names to their children, but they knew the virtues and laws of their ancestors only through unclear traditions. For many generations, they and their children lacked the basic things needed for life. Because of this, they focused only on meeting their daily needs. They spoke about these needs and did not speak about events from the distant past. Stories about ancient times and the study of old history appear in cities only when people finally have free time and when their basic needs are already met. They do not appear before that. This is why the names of the ancient people remain, but their deeds do not. I believe this because Solon said that the Egyptian priests, when telling the story of that war, mentioned many names that are known from times before Theseus. These names included Cecrops, Erechtheus, Erichthonius, and Erysichthon, and also the names of women. At that time, both men and women took part in war. Because of this custom, the people of that time made statues of the goddess wearing full armor. This showed that among living beings that live together, both male and female can practice virtue together, without any difference between them. In those days, the land was inhabited by different groups of citizens. There were artisans, there were farmers. There was also a class of warriors who had been set apart long ago by divine men. These warriors lived separately. They had everything needed for their upbringing and education. None of them owned private property. They believed that everything they had belonged to all of them together. They did not ask the other citizens for anything except the food they needed. They practiced all the duties that we described yesterday for our imagined guardians. About the land itself, the Egyptian priests said something that is not only likely but clearly true. In those days, the borders were set by the isthmus. Toward the mainland, the land reached as far as the mountains of Cithaeron and Parnes. From there, the boundary ran down toward the sea. The region of Oropus lay on the right side, and the river Asopus formed the boundary on the left. The land was the best in the world. Because of this, it could support a very large army drawn from the surrounding people. Even the small part of Attica that still exists today can compare with any region in the world for the variety and quality of its fruits and for the goodness of its pastures for animals. This shows that what I am saying is true. But in those earlier days, the land was even more beautiful and produced far more food. How can I prove this? And what part of the land today can truly be called a remnant of what once existed? The whole region now is only a long piece of land stretching far into the sea from the mainland. The sea around it is deep near the shore. Over the 9,000 years since the time I speak of, many great floods have happened. During all these years and changes, the soil that came down from the mountains did not build up as it does in other places. Instead, the earth slowly washed away and sank. Because of this, compared with what once existed, only the bones of the land remain. It is like the skeleton of a wasted body. The rich and soft soil has been washed away, and only the bare structure of the land is left, like what we see on small islands. But in ancient times, the land was very different. The mountains were high hills covered with deep soil. The plains of Phelleus were filled with rich earth. The mountains were full of forests. Some traces of this still remain. Today, some mountains only support bees. But not very long ago, people could still see roofs made from timber cut from trees that grew there. These trees were large enough to cover the biggest houses. There were also many other tall trees. People cultivated them, and they provided abundant food for cattle. The land also benefited from the yearly rainfall. Today, the rain runs off the bare earth and flows into the sea. But in those days, the land held the water. The soil was deep and clay-like, so it stored the rain within itself. The water that fell on the mountains flowed down into lower places as streams. This created many springs and rivers everywhere. Even today, sacred places remain where these springs once flowed. These are still visible signs that what I am saying is true. Such was the natural state of the land. It was farmed, as we can believe, by true farmers who devoted themselves to farming. They loved honor and had noble character. They had the best soil in the world, plenty of water, and a very balanced and pleasant climate. In those days, the city was arranged like this. The Acropolis was not the same as it is now. One night of extremely heavy rain washed away much of the soil and exposed the bare rock. At the same time, there were earthquakes. Then a great flood occurred, the third great flood before the great destruction of Deucalion. In ancient times, the hill of the Acropolis stretched as far as the rivers Eridanus and Ilissus. It included the Pnyx on one side, and Lycabettus formed the boundary on the opposite side. The whole hill was covered with soil and was flat on the top, except in one or two places. Outside the Acropolis, along the sides of the hill, lived the artisans and the farmers who worked the nearby land. The warrior class lived by themselves at the top, around the temples of Athene and Hephaestus. They had surrounded this area with a single wall, like the garden of one house. On the north side, they had shared homes and built halls where they ate together during winter. They also had all the other buildings needed for their common life, as well as temples. But they did not decorate these buildings with gold or silver. They did not use these metals at all. Instead, they followed a middle path between poverty and luxury. They built simple houses. In these houses, they, their children, and their grandchildren grew old. Then they passed the houses on to others who lived the same kind of life. In the summer, they did not use their gardens, gymnasiums, or dining halls. Instead, they used the southern side of the hill for these purposes. Where the Acropolis now stands, there was once a spring. An earthquake blocked it, and now only a few small streams remain nearby. But in those days, the spring provided plenty of water for everyone, and the water was of a good temperature in both summer and winter. This was how they lived. They were the guardians of their own people and the leaders of the Hellenes, who followed them willingly. They carefully kept the number of men and women constant through time. The number was what was needed for war, just as it is now about 20,000. These were the ancient Athenians. In this way, they ruled their own land and all of Hellas with justice. They were famous throughout Europe and Asia for the beauty of their bodies and the many virtues of their souls. Of all the people who lived in those days, they were the most admired. Next, if I remember correctly what I heard when I was a child, I will tell you about the nature and origin of their enemies. Friends should not keep their stories to themselves, but share them with each other. But before I continue the story, I must warn you about something. Do not be surprised if you hear Greek names used for foreigners. I will explain why this happens. Solon wanted to use this story in a poem, so he asked about the meanings of the names. The early Egyptians had written the names down, but they had translated them into their own language. Solon discovered the meanings of the names. When he wrote them again, he translated them into our language. My great-grandfather, Dropides, had the original writing, and it is still in my possession. I studied it carefully when I was a child. So if you hear names that sound Greek, do not be surprised. I have already explained why they appear this way. The story was very long, and it began like this. Earlier I said that the gods divided the whole earth among themselves in different portions. They built temples for themselves and established sacrifices. Poseidon received the island of Atlantis as his share. There he had children with a mortal woman. He settled them in one part of the island, which I will now describe. Facing the sea, but near the center of the island, there was a plain. It was said to be the most beautiful plain of all and very fertile. Near this plain, also near the center of the island, and about 9 kilometers, 250 meters, or 5 miles, 3,948 feet away, there was a mountain that was not very high. On this mountain lived one of the first earthborn people of that land. His name was Evener. He had a wife named Leucippe, and they had one daughter named Cleito. When Cleito had grown into a woman, her father and mother died. Poseidon fell in love with her and joined with her. He then broke the ground around the hill where she lived and surrounded it with rings of land and sea. These rings alternated, one of land and one of water. Some were larger and some were smaller, and they surrounded one another. There were 2 rings of land and 3 rings of water. He shaped them like a craftsman using a lathe, making every ring equally distant from the center. Because of this, no person could reach the island, since ships and sea travel did not yet exist. Poseidon, being a god, easily arranged the center island. From beneath the earth he brought up 2 springs of water, one warm and one cold. He also caused every kind of food to grow abundantly from the soil. He had 5 pairs of twin sons and raised them. Then he divided the island of Atlantis into 10 parts. To the firstborn son of the eldest pair, he gave his mother's home and the land around it, which was the largest and best part. He made this son king over all the others. The other sons he made princes, and he gave them rule over many people and large lands. He gave each of them a name. The eldest son, who became the first king, was named Atlas. The whole island and the ocean were later called Atlantic after him. His twin brother, who was born after him, received the far end of the island near the Pillars of Heracles. This land faced the region that is now called Gades. Poseidon gave him the name Eumelus in the Greek language, but in the language of that land he was called Gadirus. Of the second pair of twins, one was named Amphorus and the other Evamen. Of the third pair, the elder was named Menesius and the younger Autochthon. Of the fourth pair, the elder was named Elasippus and the younger Mestor. Of the fifth pair, the elder was named Azes and the younger Diaprapes. All these sons and their descendants ruled for many generations. They lived on many islands in the open sea. As I said before, they also ruled lands on our side of the sea, within the Pillars of Heracles, as far as Egypt and Tyrrhenia. Atlas had a large and honorable family. The kingdom stayed in his line, passing from the eldest son to his eldest son for many generations. They possessed great wealth, greater than any kings had ever possessed before, and greater than kings are likely to possess again. They had everything they needed in both the city and the countryside. Because their empire was large, many things were brought to them from foreign lands. The island itself also provided most of what they needed for life. First, they dug from the earth many metals and materials. They found both solid metals and metals that could be melted. One of these metals was called orichalcum. Today, it is only a name, but in those days it was real and very valuable. It was found in many places on the island and was considered more precious than anything except gold. There was also plenty of wood for building. The island provided enough food for both tame animals and wild animals. There were also many elephants on the island. Since the land provided food for all kinds of animals, those living in lakes, marshes, and rivers, and those living in mountains and plains, it also supported the largest and most hungry animal of all. All kinds of fragrant plants grew there. Roots, herbs, trees, and the sweet oils that come from fruits and flowers all grew well in that land. There were also many cultivated fruits. Some were dry foods that nourished people. Others were foods that we commonly call pulse. There were also fruits with hard shells that produced drinks, foods, and oils. There were chestnuts and other fruits that brought pleasure and enjoyment. Some fruits spoiled quickly, and others were sweet foods that people ate after a meal when they were tired of eating. All these things the sacred island produced in great beauty and in endless abundance under the light of the sun. With these blessings that the earth freely gave them, the people built temples, palaces, harbors, and docks. They organized the whole land in the following way. First, they built bridges across the rings of sea that surrounded the old city, making a road to and from the royal palace. At the beginning, they built the palace where the god and their ancestors had lived. Each generation kept adding beauty to it. Every king tried, as much as he could, to outdo the king before him. In the end, they made it amazing to see because of its size and beauty. Starting from the sea, they dug a canal 300 feet wide, 100 feet deep, and 9 kilometers 250 meters, or 5 miles, 3,948 feet long. They brought it through to the outer ring, making a passage from the sea to that place. It became a harbor, and they left an opening large enough for the biggest ships to enter. At the bridges, they cut through the rings of land that lay between the rings of sea, leaving enough space for one trireme to pass from one ring to another. They roofed over the channels so that ships could pass underneath. The banks were built much higher than the water. The largest ring, the one connected to the sea, was 555 meters, or 1,821 feet wide. The next ring of land was also 555 meters, or 1,821 feet wide. Then came two more rings, one of water and one of land, each 370 meters, or 1,214 feet wide. The ring of water around the central island was only 1 stadium wide. The island where the palace stood was 925 meters, or 3,035 feet across. Around all of this, including the rings and the bridge, which was 1/6 of a stadium wide, they built a stone wall on every side. They placed towers and gates on the bridges where the sea passed through. They cut the stone for this work from under the central island and from under the rings, both on the outside and the inside. One kind of stone was white, another was black, and another was red. While cutting the stone, they also hollowed out double docks with roofs made from the natural rock. Some buildings were plain. In others, they joined different kinds of stone together, mixing the colors to please the eye and give natural delight. They covered the whole outer wall with brass. They covered the next wall with tin. The third wall, around the citadel, shone with the red light of orichalcum. The palaces inside the citadel were built like this. In the center was a holy temple dedicated to Plato and Poseidon. No one could enter it. It was surrounded by a golden enclosure. This was the place where the family of the 10 princes was first born. Every year, the people brought the fruits of the earth in season from all 10 parts of the land, as an offering to each of the 10. There was also Poseidon's own temple. It was 1 stadium long and half a stadium wide, with height to match. It had a strange foreign appearance. They covered the whole outside of the temple with silver, except for the pinnacles, which they covered with gold. Inside the temple, the roof was ivory, skillfully worked everywhere with gold, silver, and orichalcum. All the other parts, the walls, pillars, and floor, they covered with orichalcum. In the temple, they placed statues of gold. There was the god himself, standing in a chariot, driving 6 winged horses. He was so large that his head touched the roof. Around him were 100 Nereids riding on dolphins, because people in those days believed that was their number. There were also other images inside the temple that private people had dedicated. Outside, around the temple, they placed golden statues of all the descendants of the 10 kings and of their wives. There were also many other great offerings from kings and from private people, both from the city itself and from the foreign cities they ruled over. There was also an altar whose size and workmanship matched all this greatness. In the same way, the palaces matched the greatness of the kingdom and the glory of the temple. Next, they had fountains, one of cold water and one of hot water, flowing in rich abundance. Their waters were wonderfully useful because they were pleasant and excellent. They built structures around them and planted suitable trees. They also made cisterns, some open to the sky and others roofed over, to be used in winter as warm baths. There were baths for the kings and separate baths for private people. There were separate baths for women and for horses and cattle. Each one was decorated as much as was fitting. Some of the water that flowed away they carried to the grove of Poseidon, where all kinds of trees grew, wonderful in height and beauty because of the richness of the soil. The rest of the water was carried by aqueducts along the bridges to the outer rings. There were also many temples built and dedicated to many gods. There were gardens and exercise grounds, some for men and others for horses, on both of the 2 islands formed by the rings. In the center of the larger of the 2 islands, they set apart a racecourse 1 stadium wide. Its length went all the way around the island for horse races, There were also guardhouses at intervals for the guards. The more trusted guards were appointed to watch the smaller ring, which was nearer the Acropolis. The most trusted of all were given houses inside the citadel, near the kings themselves. The docks were full of triremes and naval supplies, and everything was ready for use. This is enough about the plan of the royal palace. Leaving the palace and passing across the three rings, you came to a wall that began at the sea and went all the way around. It was 9 kilometers, 250 meters, or 5 miles, 3,948 feet away from the largest ring, which was the harbor. This wall enclosed the whole area, and its ends met at the mouth of the channel that led to the sea. The entire space inside was crowded with homes. The canal and the great harbor were full of ships and merchants from every land. Because so many people were there, the place was always filled with the sound of voices, noise, and clattering, both night and day. I have now described the city and the land around the old palace, almost in the same words used by Solon. Now I will describe the rest of the land and how it was arranged. Solon said that the whole country on the side facing the sea was very high and steep. But the land around the city itself was a flat plain. Mountains surrounded this plain and sloped down toward the sea. The plain was smooth and level and shaped like a long rectangle. It stretched 555 kilometers, or 344 miles, 4,546 feet in one direction, and 370 kilometers, or 229 miles, 4,791 feet across the center inland. This part of the island faced the south and was protected from the north. The mountains around it were famous for their number, size, and beauty, greater than any mountains that still exist. In them were many rich villages of country people. There were also rivers, lakes, and meadows that provided enough food for every animal, wild or tame. There was also much wood of many kinds, plentiful for every kind of work. Now I will describe the plain as it was shaped by nature and by the work of many generations of kings over long ages. It was mostly rectangular and long in shape. Where the lines were not straight, they followed the circular ditch. The depth, width, and length of this ditch were so great that it seemed impossible that such a work, in addition to so many others, could have been made by human hands. But I will say what I was told. The ditch was dug 100 feet deep, and it was 1 stadium wide everywhere. It went all around the plain and was 1,850 kilometers, or 1,149 miles, 2,834 feet long. It received the streams that flowed down from the mountains. These streams ran around the plain and met at the city, where the water was released into the sea. Farther inland, straight canals 100 feet wide were cut from this ditch across the plain. These canals also emptied back into the ditch that led to the sea. They were spaced 18 kilometers, 500 meters, or 11 miles, 2,616 feet apart. By these canals, they brought wood down from the mountains to the city. They also carried the fruits of the earth in ships, cutting cross channels from one canal to another and to the city. Twice each year they gathered the fruits of the earth. In winter they used the rain that fell from the sky. In summer they used water from the land by bringing streams from the canals. As for the people, each portion of land in the plain had to provide a leader for the men fit for service in the military. Each portion of land was a square 1 kilometer, 850 meters, or 1 mile 790 feet on each side. Altogether, there were 60,000 such portions. There were also very many people living in the mountains and in the rest of the country. They were divided among the portions of land, and leaders were chosen for them according to their districts and villages. Each leader had to provide for war 1/6 of a war chariot, so that together they made 10,000 chariots. He also had to provide 2 horses with riders, and a pair of chariot horses without a seat, along with a horseman who could fight on foot carrying a small shield. There was also a charioteer who stood behind the warrior to guide the 2 horses. He also had to provide 2 heavily armed soldiers, 2 slingers, 3 stone throwers, and 3 men who carried javelins and were lightly armed. He also had to provide 4 sailors, helping make the crew for 1,200 ships. This was the military order of the royal city. The order of the other 9 kingdoms was different, but describing all their differences would take too long. As for offices and honors, this was the arrangement from the beginning. Each of the 10 kings ruled his own part of the land and his own city. He had complete authority over the citizens and, in most cases, over the laws. He could punish or kill anyone he chose. But the order among the kings and their relations with one another were governed by the commands of Poseidon. These laws had been handed down through tradition. The first kings wrote them on a pillar of orichalcum. This pillar stood in the center of the island, in the temple of Poseidon. The kings gathered there every 5th year and every 6th year, alternating, so that both odd and even numbers were honored equally. When they gathered, they discussed matters that concerned them all. They also examined whether any king had broken the law. Then they judged the matter. Before judging, they made a sacred pledge to one another. Bulls roamed freely in the temple of Poseidon. The 10 kings were left alone inside the temple. They prayed to the god that they might capture the bull that was pleasing to him. Then they hunted the bulls without weapons, using only staves and ropes. When they caught a bull, they led it to the pillar and cut its throat over the top of it, so that the blood fell upon the sacred writing. On the pillar, along with the laws, there was also an oath that called down great curses on anyone who disobeyed. After killing the bull in the proper way, they burned its limbs. They filled a bowl with wine and placed a clot of blood in it for each king. The rest of the animal they placed in the fire, after purifying the pillar all around. Then they drew wine from the bowl into golden cups. They poured a libation onto the fire and swore an oath. They swore that they would judge according to the laws written on the pillar. They swore that they would punish anyone who had broken them. They also swore that in the future they would not break the laws themselves if they could help it. They also swore that they would not command others and would not obey any ruler to act against the laws of their father Poseidon. Each king offered this prayer for himself and for his descendants. At the same time, he drank from his cup and dedicated it in the temple of the god. After they had eaten and were satisfied, night came. The fire from the sacrifice had grown cool. Then they put on beautiful dark blue robes. Sitting on the ground at night, over the embers of the sacrifices by which they had sworn, they put out all the fire around the temple. There they gave and received judgment if any king had brought an accusation against another. When morning came, they wrote their judgments on a golden tablet. They dedicated the tablet, along with their robes, in the temple as a memorial. Many special laws for the kings were written around the temples. The most important law was this: they must never make war against one another. If anyone in one of their cities tried to overthrow the royal house, the others had to come to help. Like their ancestors, they had to make decisions together about war and other matters. The descendants of Atlas held the highest authority among them. No king had the power to put one of his relatives to death, unless the majority of the 10 kings agreed. Such was the great power that the god established in the lost island of Atlantis. Later, this power was turned against our land for the following reason, as the tradition says. For many generations, as long as the divine nature remained in them, they obeyed the laws and honored the god whose descendants they were. They had noble spirits. They joined gentleness with wisdom in the many changes of life and in their dealings with one another. They valued nothing except virtue. They cared little for their present life. They thought lightly of gold and other possessions, which seemed to them like a burden. They were not made foolish by luxury. Wealth did not take away their self-control. They lived with moderation. They understood clearly that such things grow through virtue and friendship with one another. But when people care too much about wealth and honor it too greatly, those things are lost, and friendship is lost with them. Because they thought this way, and because the divine nature remained in them, these good qualities grew stronger among them. But when the divine part in them began to fade, and was mixed too often and too much with mortal nature, the human nature became stronger. Then they could no longer bear their good fortune with dignity. They began to behave badly. To anyone who could truly see, they appeared clearly corrupted, because they were losing the most beautiful of their precious gifts. But to those who could not see true happiness, they seemed glorious and blessed, even at the moment when they were full of greed and unjust power. Zeus, the god of gods, who rules according to law and sees such things, saw that this noble race had fallen into misery. He wished to punish them so that they might be corrected and become better. So he gathered all the gods into their most sacred dwelling, which stands at the center of the world and looks upon all created things. When he had gathered them together, he spoke to them and said,
The rest of the dialogue of Critias has been lost.